is, yeah. This is a photograph that somebody took from the cabin of that bear coming at us in Allegheny State Park. So, um, yeah. Yeah, you know, you're probably right, but um,
Which is more dangerous, brown or black? Because I understand one of them is practically harmless, the other one may be worried. Yeah, brown is the bad one.
okay.
That's the grizzly bear. Black bear doesn't have the hump around its shoulders. That's the black bear. So those are the ones that when they're nosing through your garbage, if you come out in plastic pants, they'll look at you and then walk away.
Yeah, I wouldn't mess with it. I wouldn't get close enough to find out.
My first husband's family had a cabin down in Pennsylvania, and they got a bear, and so we always had this bear rug all around. We moved to Ithaca, and we were right across the street from a very low-income school district, and Halloween came along, and these kids came. They must have come every day for a week to get, goodies from Halloween, their steak that they deserved. So finally, we just took the bear, and all we did was stick him out the window. Let me tell you, there's another kid. Oh, God, it drove us nuts until we finally figured it out. I still think the older is feed bears on their back.
Yeah, I would not do that. Right. Yeah. Here's another bear story. Um, so, two ladies were like out jogging on the path in the park. Suddenly things got real quiet. The birds stopped singing and even the leaves stopped rustling. And they looked behind them, and there is this bear coming at them. And they both get going. One of them says, "Well, it's a good thing I've got my best running shoes on today." Her friend said, "But you can't outrun a bear." She said, "I don't have to outrun the bear. I only have to outrun you." All right, so today we're talking again about Lakota medicine man Black Elk, and he, in his story, he's telling the story of how he became a medicine person, and the story is interesting. The book Black Elk Speaks, partly because we get to know this one individual person, but also, as I was saying last time, he lived from 1863 to 1950. So when he was born during the Civil War, when, if you can imagine it, the Midwest was not yet part of the United States. And so during the American Civil War, for the Lakota, for the Midwestern Native Americans, that was a great period in which the United States was too busy to attack them. And it wasn't until after the Civil War that then, there were all of these soldiers and all of this war stuff, and there was a decision that they were just going to push all of that kind of soldiers and war machine off into the Midwest to fight the Native Americans. And so Black Elk lived the first years of his life in a traditional teepee village, and doing the activities and the bison hunt. And then when he was around 20, his people, the invasion had really begun, and his people began to be put onto reservations. So what we're looking at today, we're still talking about the traditional village. And in his lifetime, he's going to witness all of these big things. He's going to live through the Battle of Little Bighorn and the Ghost Dance, and he'll be an eyewitness at the massacre at Wounded Knee. That's going to be later in his life. When I'm sorry, you mean in this picture or the previous one? This. Oh, this. Here in the foreground, this is a woman, and she is stretching a bison hide. So they skin the bison, and they peg it. They kind of nail it to the ground, stretched out, after kind of scraping out the stuff. And that is how you, because you can, I mean, from this hide, you can make clothing, you can make a teepee, you can make blankets, you can make all kinds of things out of it. All right. So the teepee, I mean, that's probably the most famous kind of Native American house. It's the one that we probably first think of when we think of, Native Americans. Actually, it was just the tribes of the Midwest who had the teepee, who kind of lived in this relationship with the bison. Why? Why would it make sense for this particular group of people to live in this bison, leather tent? Because it's portable. It's something where, what we're looking at here, you've got these like 20-foot, you would get a young tree that was about 20 feet tall, these 20-foot, sticks. You would tie them together, you would wrap it in hides. The teepee is, it's bigger than you would imagine it. The thing is, it's about like 20 feet tall. It's got room for a family of 8 to kind of live comfortably with a fire always burning in the middle. That's why you can see at the top, the tip of a teepee, is always smoke damaged, and that's because there's just constant burning going on inside of it. A teepee was made of 16 to 20 full bison hides. So it was also heavier than you would imagine. It's heavier than a person would be able to lift and move. Before the 1600s, people with teepees they actually had these large dogs, kind of, like the size of a Malamute. I mean, it's a big dog that you could tie on a sled, pull your teepee that way. Then with horses, you could move your teepee that way. So, for one thing, it's important because it's portable, because when your food source is constantly moving, you need to be able to pick up and move. Or if there is, friction with some other tribe, when we think about the American Midwest, we should be imagining there were at least 20 different languages, at least 20 different cultures. And to say that there was a tribe like the Lakota tribe, that wouldn't necessarily be just one village. There could be kind of numerous villages of this one tribe. So there were all of these groups of people. They were always on the move. And, if you found that your village was too close to somebody else's, it's another reason why you would want to then take the thing apart. Moving a Lakota village, it was something that you could take the entire thing up. You could wake up in the morning, take the entire thing apart in about 4 hours, move it 10 miles in a day, and put it together in 4 hours before bedtime. Now, so there's that. There's the logistics of it, but there's also the deeper meaning that the teepee is made of wood from a plant, and it's also made of leather from an animal. And this was part of, when we think of like the Native American, relationship with the rest of nature, with the plant world, the animal world. The deeper symbolism of the teepee was living inside of the bison, living inside of this thing that it's not just what you eat, it's not just what you follow and kill, it's what keeps you alive, and you live inside of it. So Black Elk, one of his earliest memories is what it was like to break camp for the bison hunt. He said one morning, the crier, so they've got like a town crier, they have somebody in their village whose job it is to be loud, and that person, when it's time to, for everybody to do some activity, that person just goes around and says it real loud. The crier came around the circle of the village, calling out that we were going to break camp. It was the advisor's duty to save fire for the people because we had no matches then. For the Lakota, when Black Elk was young, there were no matches, no lighters. They always had to have a fire in every home. And so when they were going to move the village, one person had to build a sort of lantern, like a candle lantern, except that you're building it with no metal, and you don't have like wax candles the way that we imagine wax candles. You've got some kind of candle that is handmade, and you're carrying it in a lantern that's made out of wood. So the lantern itself is flammable. So this is a little bit hard to imagine, like how you move this thing 10 miles. But if the fire went out, then you didn't have fire. And the only way to get it was to go find some other village, some other camp, and ask them if you could take some of their fire. When they move this village 10 miles in a day, it's somebody's job to keep the fire alive. And in my imagination, I sort of imagine you would have 2 or 3 people doing this because it just seems so improbable that it could work. The deeper significance of it is that when you set up your camp and people set up the first thing you do is you light a central fire, and then people build their teepees, and then each person brings a lit stick from the central fire to light a fire in the middle of their home. And so you're in your new campsite, and yet the fire that's burning in the middle of your teepee is literally the same fire that was burning at the previous site. And it's the same fire that has been continuously burning for as long as anybody can remember. Another thing that you have a relationship with is this one fire, and that everybody's fire in all of these different homes is not just related, it's actually just slivers of this same fire. Yeah, a village could be like 200 people. And then when you gathered the entire tribe together, like for the annual Sundance, that could be a couple of thousand people. A Lakota village, like a teepee village, if you can imagine like an Iroquois longhouse, which is like one grandmother, her daughters, her unmarried sons, her daughters' husbands and children. And so like your average Iroquois longhouse was like 60 to 120 people. A Lakota village would be like 2 or 3 longhouses. There would be 2 or 3 like main grandmothers and their female descendants and whatever males were attached to them. And then if one of her daughters got married, usually to somebody from another village, another tribe, another family, the man would move in, would join the bride's village. Or if one of her sons got married, he would go and join the other village. Yeah, it is. It's a matrilineal culture, or it's like bison. It's like many animal species, where your family is reckoned through your mother's side, and where in this culture, men, sons, fathers, whatever, they are kind of expendable. Like you can afford. Your village can lose, some of its men and still keep going. But if your village is losing its women, then it's not a village that's going to survive. So they pack up this village. Black Elk recalls, all the people began taking down their teepees, packing them on pony drags. We broke camp and started in formation. The 4 advisors first, a crier behind them, the chiefs next, and then the people with the loaded pony drags in a long line, and then following that was their herd of ponies. So when he talks about the pony drag, what he's saying is you can take 2 poles from a teepee, and again, these poles are like 20 feet long. You can tie them in an X over the back of a horse, and then you can balance things on this kind of sled. So this would be the equivalent of a U-Haul. This was how they moved their stuff. It was also their ambulance. If there was somebody in the village who could not walk, you could make a leather stretcher across this thing and put the person in it. The difference, of course, is that there are no wheels. The pony drag does not have wheels. And actually, there were no wheels because there were no roads. I mean, it would have been too bumpy. Like, it actually made more sense to haul people in this kind of sled. Black Elk recalls, before the hunt, the head man of the advisors went around picking out the best hunters with the fastest horses. And to these he said, good young warriors, my relatives, your work I know is good. So today you will feed the helpless. Perhaps there are some old and feeble people without sons, or some who have little children and no man, and you will help these, and whatever you kill will be theirs. And this was a great honor. So this was something that you wanted to be chosen for. It was a sign that you were one of the best hunters. It was a sign of generosity that you would sort of, hunt on behalf of some other household. Now, then we're wondering, like, what about these guys and their kids, and how are they going to feel about, like dad hunting and giving it away to somebody else? But the bison. I mean, once the bison was hunted and brought back to the village, it was more of a communal property. So it's not that these hunters would go hungry. They could. The Lakota economy, if you could call it an economy, was an economy of generosity, where kind of the greatest thing you could have was your generosity, your ability to give things away. And so these hunters would get to show their generosity by hunting and just giving a whole bison to some needy family. But then this family that received the bison, this would be their chance to show generosity. Then they wouldn't just keep it all for themselves. They would get to give things away. They would get to give away bison meat. They would get to give away, products, bone, tools, all of these things. And so then that family who was accustomed to accepting the generosity of others, this would be their big chance to be like the most generous family in the village, and that kind of kept things in balance. The bison hunt. And we talked about this a couple of months ago, but the bison hunt. You figure out where the bison are going to be. You've got scouts, they figure out where the bison are going to be. Then you move your village there so that you're close to them. On the morning of the bison hunt, you find them, they are like drinking in the morning. But you don't just sneak up and start shooting. The first step is you get your warriors on horses and you ride into this herd, and you need to start a bison stampede. You need to get the bison running at full speed before you figure out which ones you're going to shoot at. Because the ones that the ones that you want to shoot at are going to be the ones who are in the back of the herd. You don't want to take out the strongest and most reproductive members of the bison herd. You don't want, your goal as a bison hunter is not to kill the herd. So you figure out which ones are kind of struggling to keep up in the back. You don't want to take out the really young ones. So the easiest way to figure this out is to get them all running full speed. You ride into this bison hunt. Black Elk describes the bison hunters. They were all nearly naked with their quivers full of arrows hanging on their left sides. They would ride right up to a bison and shoot him behind the left shoulder. So you're in this bison hunt, you're in your underwear because wearing a full leather outfit is just gonna make it harder to move, especially if you fall off your horse in the middle of a bison hunt. You need to be able to get back on as quickly as possible. Lakota hunter warriors, since you needed one hand for your bow and one hand for your arrow, you had to ride your horse, no saddle, no stirrups, no reins. They would train the horse so that you could steer the horse with your ankles. You could kind of kick in with your ankles and let the horse know if you needed it to slow down, speed up, or turn from one side to another. I mean, also, the horse knows that it's in a bison stampede, so like it'll keep going. And then shooting at a bison on horseback, you can't just shoot it anywhere, because a bison with arrows on it can keep running another 30 miles. So specifically, you're shooting for this one target. You're trying to get it just in the space at the base of its shoulder so that it will fall down and just, and won't be able to keep running. So the bison hunt, not only were you kind of, riding with no hands on the horse and, jiggling around, you're on a bison stampede, you're trying not to fall off. You're also shooting, but the target that you're shooting at is very small. And that's something that children started training from, that boys would train for, like from the age of 5. Then at the end of the hunt, you've got some bison. You've actually killed some bison. That's really impressive. There were some parts like the tongue, which people would just cut out right there and eat raw, and apparently that was like the real delicacy of the bison, was to eat its raw tongue. Different parts, then you would take, put the other pieces on a pony drag, take it back to the village. Some parts of it would be kind of cooked in a big barbecue that night or over the next couple of days. There was no refrigeration, so some of it would be salted and smoked, and they would make bison jerky. As a matter of fact, among the Lakota, the favorite travel food was called pemmican, and it was dried bison meat with berries mashed into it. So it was kind of this like sweet bison, salted bison jerky. And you could put it into your like saddle pouch. Apparently like a couple of bites of this would just keep you going through the day. It had some meat, salt, and sugar. John Fire Lame Deer recalls that this is a little bit disgusting, but he says that one of the favorite bison foods was that right after the kill, you would take the intestine of the bison, string the entire thing out, which could be like 100 feet. And people would just start at both ends and they would eat this intestine, which he said was full of partly digested grass. So that what you're getting is actually like, it's like calamari and a salad. I don't know, but kind of like, what is that? Like a spinach casserole inside of a sausage. But he said this was one of the favorite things, and that like it was really good for your digestion, and you got some vegetable into your diet. So whatever. So yeah, when we hear about isn't it great, the Native Americans using every part of the bison? It's like, well, yeah, but also it meant eating a raw tongue and chewing on raw intestine, and the way of cooking is you would take the bison stomach, you would take the stomach of the animal, and that would become this bag, and you could build a rack for the stomach. So if you can imagine like a rack that's holding a garbage bag, except the garbage bag is leather. And remember, these are people with no metal. So they've got no metal pots and pans. They have no dishes that you can put a fire under. But what you could do is you could put bison meat and some plant matter. You could put it into the bison empty stomach, and you would drop hot rocks from the fire into the bag until it would boil the water, and then that would make you this bison stew. So there were all of these fascinating and I think really ingenious ways of using the different parts of the animal. I for one would just not get past you have to cut it and or pull things off. Yeah, that's enough. That's as far as I'm going to get. What? Tripe? Yeah, right. Like tripe or like haggis. I mean, I don't know. But like cigarettes, he said. Oh, sweetbreads. He said like cigarettes. It's that's really interesting. But yes. So all of these different things, and the diet on the plains, which really was mostly bison. I mean, there was no corn farming. I mean, when you're moving your village around, you didn't have farms. You didn't have the corn, squash, and beans. Your average Iroquois diet would have been 90% corn, squash, and beans with squirrel oil. And then occasionally somebody would get a deer and everybody would be really excited. But if we're thinking about the Iroquois diet, it was probably venison a couple of times a week. The Lakota diet was mostly bison. There was gathering, there were plants that could be gathered on the plains, but I mean, the plains, a lot of it is savanna. So this is the Atkins diet, no bread, no starch, mainly meat, and whatever, partly digested grass in the intestine. and then some like berries, and wild things that have been picked on the plains. It sounds questionable. It did keep people alive. You can survive on that. Okay. Now, Black Elk, this little boy, he's growing up in this village, and he has his first vision. And he remembers this, and this is another one of those things that is difficult for me to imagine, because I've grown up with television. I mean, I've got visions, flashing images, story. I've got these things. He did not have television. He and his people, they had dreams and visions. And, when he says, I kind of have to believe it, that he had this vision when he was 5. And he could remember it really clearly, even decades later when he's telling his life story. So, his first vision, he was 5 years old when his grandfather decided it was time for him to start target practice. So, his grandfather makes him a little bow, like a training bow for a 5-year-old, makes him some arrows, and if you can imagine this, each one of these arrows has to be handmade. Like, you have to find this perfectly straight, branch. You got to make the entire thing yourself. And so the idea of I'm going to make arrows so that a 5-year-old can learn how to fire a bow, and okay. But his grandfather decides, you're 5 years old, it's time you learn target practice. A thunderstorm was coming. And just as I was riding into the woods, there was a kingbird sitting on a limb. This is not a dream, it happened. So, he's 5 years old, he's learning how to ride a horse, he's learning how to shoot from horseback, which is important because at around the age of 16, he's going to have to do this in a bison stampede. So he's got to start young. And the target that he's shooting at is about this big. I mean, he's shooting at something small. I was just about to shoot at the kingbird when the bird spoke and said, "The clouds all over are one-sided." Perhaps it meant that all the clouds were looking at me. And then it said, "Listen, a voice is calling you." Then I looked up at the clouds, and 2 men were coming there, head first, like arrows slanting down. And as they came, they sang a sacred song, and the thunder was like drumming. They sang, "Behold, a sacred voice is calling you. All over the sky, a sacred voice is calling." So, he's about to shoot at this kingbird. He starts hearing voices in the sky, and he looks up, and these 2 lightning bolts are just coming down from the sky, and they are coming right at him, and they are singing. But when the lightning bolts were very close to me, they turned around, and suddenly they were geese. Then they were gone, and the rain came with a big wind and a roaring. Now, Black Elk's first vision. In the beginning, he's pointing an arrow at this bird. He is making the decision that he has the power to take life. He is going to kill this bird. Then the bird speaks. And then he looks up, and something in the sky is shooting arrows at him. So his decision that he has the power and authority to take the life of this bird, then he looks up, and there's something up there that has the power and authority to use him as target practice. Then the warriors turn into birds. Then these lightning bolts, they change from, projectile weapons, these deadly weapons that are pointing at him, and then suddenly they are these harmless geese that are flying away. And at the end of the village, the boy does not shoot the bird. He has now had this experience of, being the hunter and also being the hunted. He has had the experience of deciding to take the life of this bird and then kind of seeing that same scene from the bird's perspective, from the perspective of something that is small and helpless and is about to be killed. So Black Elk's first vision, he says, "I did not tell this vision to anyone. I liked to think about it, but I was afraid to tell it." So he's this little boy. He's had this vision, and it haunts him, and it has given him a lot to think about. Now, in addition, it was a vision of the thunder beings. He had been kind of singled out, selected, targeted by the thunder beings. Now, usually a Native American vision would involve some plant or some animal. Then there were certain people who had visions of the thunder beings where the thunder spoke to them. And this would be a sign of having a special power and destiny. For example, having been chosen by the spirits to be a medicine person, which is a great honor, and it's someone that you respect, and it's also something that's very dangerous. It's something where you knew that you were going to be in contact with sickness and with harmful spirits, and that you might not get to live a full, and natural life. And so he's had this vision, and he knows that it's important. He also knows that it's dangerous to him, and that if people find out that the thunder beings have been speaking to him, that people will treat him differently, and that they may expect him to have some greater power or some greater importance. So, Black Elk is going to be so afraid of this vision that he's going to keep it a secret. He's going to keep this vision a secret for 12 years, until he is 17 years old. And in that time, he's going to be pursued and stalked by these visions that are going to keep trying to call him to take on a special responsibility and a special destiny. He'll have visions that let him know that he is being called to be a medicine person. He is very afraid, and he does not want to be a medicine person. So, in our next session, we will take a look at what are some of the common experiences of Native American medicine people? What are some of the expectations, but also what are some of the dangers of being a Native American medicine person? So, thank you very much, and we will continue in February. And I will, thank you, and I will take questions, yes. Uh-huh. Okay, I was saying that that we were going to talk about the dangers of being a medicine person.
Are there any people in your college classes who claim to be part of some kind of tribe or Native American group?
Oh yeah, that's a really good question. And thus far, and now I've been teaching Native American religions for almost 10 years, and it's interesting, this question, because what I sometimes get is somebody will say, like, my father is Native American, but nobody talks about it, or like my grandmother is Native American, but she never talks about it. What I find, and this might have something to do with that I'm, just the particular school, Canisius, where I teach. But I have not had, I've not had students who have come up and said, like, I grew up in this tradition. Um, Right. Yeah, yeah. No, I know. And I always think like, oh, so, at some point it's going to happen. Somebody's going to say like, I grew up around this and what you're saying is totally wrong. Actually, what I get is like, oh, like, yeah, I'm related to some Native Americans. Nobody tells me anything about it. And, it's some kind of secret. And so it's interesting to hear somebody explain it. Yeah, and I should say, there is, a lot of this Native American stuff. I mean, some of it that I guess is supposed to be secret, but I feel like I read about it in books, and so like, right. So I don't know. The secret is available. So yeah, that's a good question. All right, good. We will continue in a month. Thank you.